May 29th, 1780, a field near the Waxhaws, on the border of North and South Carolina. About 350 American soldiers have just laid down their muskets. Their commander fought, lost badly, and is now doing the only sane thing left: surrendering. Men are on their knees. Some have their hands in the air. A few are waving anything white they can find. Then, a shot rings out. Nobody will ever agree on who fired it. And the horse belonging to the 25-year-old British cavalry officer leading the attack drops dead beneath him, pinning his leg to the ground. His men see their colonel go down under a flag of truce, and they lose their minds. For the next several minutes, British and Loyalist dragoons ride through a field of surrendering men and cut them down with sabers. Soldiers who are already wounded get run through again. Men with their hands raised get hacked to the ground. By the time it's over, more than 100 Americans are dead, and over 150 more are too badly hurt to move, against just a handful of casualties on the British side. The colonel's name is Banastre Tarleton. Within days, his name will be attached to a phrase that spreads through every Patriot militia camp in the South: Tarleton's Quarter. That doesn't mean mercy. It means the opposite. A promise that nobody here is walking away. 8 months later, on a frozen cow pasture in South Carolina, Banastre Tarleton is going to find out exactly what that promise feels like from the other end of a musket.
To understand what happens on that cow pasture, you first need to understand who Banastre Tarleton was, and why the British thought sending him after the problem was the smartest move on the board. Tarleton came from a wealthy Liverpool merchant family and had spent the entire war building a reputation as the most feared cavalry officer in North America. In December of 1776, barely a year into the fighting, he led the raid that captured American General Charles Lee, George Washington's second in command, dragging him out of a New Jersey tavern still in his nightshirt. It was a genuine humiliation for the Continental Army, pulled off with almost no British casualties, and it made Tarleton's career. He fought at the disastrous fall of Charleston in 1780, then again at the catastrophic American defeat at Camden a few months later, where his cavalry helped turn a retreat into a rout.
And then came Waxhaws, and the reputation that followed him for the rest of his life. Whether Tarleton personally ordered the killing of surrendering men, or simply lost control of soldiers who thought their commander had just been shot dead under a white flag, is something historians still argue about today. What isn't in dispute is what the story did once it spread. Patriot recruitment across the Carolinas, which had been sputtering for months, caught fire. By January of 1781, Tarleton had become something close to a boogeyman, the man the British sent when they wanted a problem to simply stop existing. Lord Cornwallis had exactly that kind of problem. His name was Daniel Morgan, and he had spent the previous 25 years waiting for a reason to hate the British even more than he already did. Daniel Morgan's grudge against the British Army started decades before a single shot of the Revolution was fired. As a young teamster hauling supplies during the French and Indian War in 1756, Morgan got into an argument with a British lieutenant who struck him across the face with the flat of his sword. Morgan, a huge, hot-tempered young man, knocked the officer flat with one punch. For striking an officer, he was court-martialed and sentenced to 500 lashes on his bare back, a punishment that killed most men who received it. Morgan survived it. For the rest of his life, he liked to tell people the drummer counting out the strokes lost count and stopped at 499, which meant, as far as Morgan was concerned, the British still owed him one. He carried that grudge into the Revolution. He commanded a company of Virginia riflemen, so accurate, they specifically hunted British officers at ranges the British didn't think were possible. He marched with Benedict Arnold's brutal winter expedition to Quebec in 1775. 2 years later, at Saratoga, it was one of Morgan's own sharpshooters, acting on Arnold's direct order, who shot British General Simon Fraser off his horse at the exact moment the battle turned.
Then, like a lot of great soldiers in this war, Morgan got passed over for promotion. He resigned in 1779 and went home to Virginia, done with the whole thing. He didn't stay done. After the disaster at Camden in 1780, the same battle where Tarleton's cavalry helped destroy the American army, Nathaniel Greene asked Morgan to come back. Morgan was in his mid-40s now, wrecked by sciatica so severe he sometimes needed to be lifted into the saddle. He said yes anyway. By January of 1781, the old wagoner was back in the field with roughly 1,000 Continentals and militia under his command. And Lord Cornwallis had just made the decision that was about to end Banastre Tarleton's winning streak for good. Nathaniel Greene had split his army in two, sending Morgan toward the British-held fort at 96 to threaten it from the west. Cornwallis, worried about losing that fort, ordered Tarleton to find Morgan and destroy him. Tarleton did what Tarleton always did. He moved fast, pushing his men through freezing rain and mud, marching through the night to close the distance before the Americans could escape across the broad river. Morgan knew he was coming, and here's where he made a decision that broke every rule of 18th century warfare. Instead of retreating across that river to safety, he chose to make his stand on an open cow pasture called the Cowpens, with the river directly behind him, cutting off his own escape route. To Tarleton, this looked like exactly the mistake a cornered amateur would make. To Morgan, it was the entire plan. His militia had a reputation for breaking and running the moment British bayonets appeared. Put a river behind them with no way across, and running stopped being an option. The only way out was through. That night, Morgan walked from campfire to campfire, sitting with strangers, showing them the scars on his back from a whipping he'd survived before most of them were born. He told them exactly what he needed, and it wasn't heroism. Fire twice, aim for the men with the shiny buttons, then fall back. That was the whole job. Behind the militia, he placed his Continental regulars, and behind a small rise, completely out of Tarleton's sight, he hid roughly 100 American cavalry under Colonel William Washington, a distant cousin of the commander-in-chief, held back until the exact moment Morgan needed them. 3 lines, a trap disguised as a rout. By dawn on January 17th, 1781, Tarleton's exhausted, half-starved men were marching straight into it. Tarleton's men had been marching since 2 in the morning, force-marched through freezing mud with almost no sleep in days. When his scouts spotted the American position at dawn, Tarleton didn't slow down to study the ground. He'd beaten militia before. He ordered an immediate attack. The first American line, Morgan's hand-picked sharpshooters hidden behind trees, opened up at long range, picking off officers exactly as instructed, dropping more than a dozen of Tarleton's lead cavalry before falling back. Confused but undeterred, Tarleton pushed his infantry into the second line, the militia. The militia did exactly what Morgan asked. Fired once, fired again, then right on schedule, turned and pulled back. To Tarleton, this looked like exactly what he expected. The militia breaking, like they always did. He pushed harder, ordering a full charge to finish the rout. And that's when his entire line, exhausted and sprinting after what they thought was a fleeing enemy, slammed directly into Morgan's third line, the Continentals. Men who hadn't moved, who hadn't panicked, and who opened fire at close range into a British formation that had lost all its order. For a moment, the fighting hung in the balance. Then, Morgan's militia, the same men Tarleton assumed were gone, reappeared on the British left flank, reformed, and opened fire into the side of his line. At almost the same instant, William Washington's hidden cavalry burst out from behind the rise and slammed into the British right. It's called a double envelopment, an attack from the front and both flanks at once, so complete the enemy has nowhere left to retreat.
Military historians still cite it as one of the cleanest examples in history, executed not by seasoned European professionals, but by a scratch American force of farmers, backwoods militia, and a general who wasn't even supposed to still be in the army. Tarleton's legion, soldiers who had never lost a battle, collapsed. Whole companies threw down their weapons where they stood. Others simply ran. By 8 o'clock in the morning, less than an hour after the first shots, it was finished. Tarleton himself was still on the field, trying to rally whatever cavalry he had left, when William Washington came after him personally. Washington rode ahead of his own men and found himself suddenly surrounded. Tarleton and 2 of his officers, blades drawn, face to face with the American colonel. One British officer swung at Washington from the side. Before the blow could land, a young orderly riding with Washington, later tradition remembers him as an enslaved or formerly enslaved teenager, though his exact identity has never been confirmed, fired a pistol and dropped the officer from his saddle. Washington's own blade snapped in half, fighting off the second officer. As the story has long been told, the man in the center, Tarleton himself, lunged at Washington, missed, then fired a pistol at close range that grazed Washington's knee and killed his horse under him. Tarleton didn't stay to finish it. He galloped for Cornwallis's camp with barely 50 men still capable of riding, leaving the rest of his command behind. It was the same choice his own soldiers had denied hundreds of surrendering Americans 8 months earlier at Waxhaws. This time, Tarleton got to make it, and his men didn't. American losses stood at a remarkably light dozen or so killed and around 60 wounded. Tarleton's losses were catastrophic by comparison. By the National Park Service's own tally, he lost 86% of the roughly 1,100 men he marched onto that field, killed, wounded, or captured. In under 60 minutes, one of the most feared units in the British Army had effectively ceased to exist. The damage went a lot further than one morning in a cow pasture. When Tarleton reached Cornwallis's camp and reported what had happened, an American prisoner who witnessed the scene later claimed Cornwallis was so furious he pressed the tip of his own sword against the ground and leaned into the hilt until the blade snapped. True or not, the fury was real. Humiliated, Cornwallis stripped his army down and set off in a desperate chase after Nathaniel Greene's forces across 2 states, a pursuit historians call the Race to the Dan. He caught up to Greene 2 months later at Guilford Courthouse and technically won, but it cost him so many men that a member of Parliament later said one more victory like it would ruin his entire army. Cornwallis retreated toward the Virginia coast to rest. He picked a little tobacco port called Yorktown to do it in. You already know how that part ends. When the British surrendered there in October of 1781, American and French officers hosted a dinner for their defeated counterparts. Banastre Tarleton was pointedly left off the guest list. A deliberate, public snub for a man whose name had become a byword for a battle with no survivors. Daniel Morgan didn't stick around to enjoy any of it. He buried the dead, sent his prisoners north, and within weeks rode home to Virginia to recover from a war his own back had been trying to quit for years. Congress struck him a gold medal. He earned every ounce of it, lying face down at times because he couldn't sit upright. If this story hit different, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with the battle you think deserves the next deep dive. And if you learned something today, smash that like button so more people find this channel. Until next time.